Hello YouTube, welcome back to this week's altcoin update. First and foremost, remember nothing discussed today is financial advice, not a financial advisor. This is just for educational purposes only, and now we've got that out of the way. As you'll have seen on the thumbnail, today we are going to be taking a look at ETH, TIA, WOO, and SUI, SU, I have no idea how to pronounce these things, but we'll take a deep dive into these altcoins because these were the most requested ones. If you guys don't know, we put out a request on our Twitter on Monday, and we also put out a new post on YouTube, and you guys can let us know what altcoins you want covering next week. Before we get into today's analysis, I just want to say a massive thank you, guys. A massive thank you. Not only did we smash the 1,000 subscribers last week, but we've managed to get up to 2,000 subscribers, so this absolutely blows my mind. We've been stuck around 500 subscribers for well over a year, and I've been quite happy with that. 500 people that like watching our videos, always interact with us. But for some reason we blew up over the weekend, and now we're sat at 2.33. So welcome aboard to all the new people on our channel. So if you are enjoying the content, don't forget to go down below and hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. Now, I've got that mushy stuff out of the way. Let's jump in. Right, so ETH. We took a look at ETH last week. And we were saying where we were. There we go. Let's zoom back. We did the video on here on the Tuesday. We were saying this isn't an area that we'd personally belong in, not on a high time frame. And why is that? Is we had this golden pocket just above us. And what have we done? Well, we've gone straight into that golden pocket. And we've had a bit of a rejection, and we've hung around. Now, obviously, this rejection is twofold. It's not just ETH getting the rejection here. We also know that Bitcoin also came into the macro golden pocket. So across the board, whether you were trading altcoins or you were trading Bitcoin, either way, it was a point of caution. Okay, so this is not a place where we'd personally be longing. If anything, it'd be a place to look for hedges where we are right now, not necessarily because you've missed your major opportunity higher. However, it depends if you're a high time frame trader or a low time frame trader. So what can happen next? Well, first and foremost, let's throw it on. In fact, let's just bring on this because this makes life easier to view. And we can see here, let's zoom out a little bit. Now, if ETH continues up. Now, bear in mind, ETH against Bitcoin is showing some strength at the moment. All the clues when you're trading ETH is in the ETH BTC chart. Now, the guys in our members understand what I've been looking at, and this is why we're expecting this push to the upside. However, if you want the hidden clues, then look at the BTC chart. Now, if we are going to continue seeing strength and move up higher, then realistically, the next major zone to be looking at is around this 3K zone. Now, it's between 3K and 3.2, and we can see here on the volume profile, we can see we've got this high volume node. Now, if it does go higher than this, then realistically, let's zoom out to the weekly, then I'll be looking to come all the way up to around 3.5K. Okay, now why 3.5K? Well, we've got a nice weekly zone up there. Obviously, this is March 22 highs. And if we draw a Fibonacci from the all-time high to the low, then we can also see that we've got the golden pocket sitting around there as well. Okay, so if we do break through this 3K level, this 3K to 3.2K level, as we can see with the high volume, then realistically the next major resistance will be above us at 3.3 to 3.4. Okay, so this is just a level-to-level game at the moment until we start to see these regions. Let's just delete this and clear up this chart a little bit. Until we can start to see these regions here cleared, getting above 4K, then we can start talking about targeting the overall highs. Okay, we can start looking up at obviously the 5 grand plus level. But we've still got resistance contend with, so it's pointless getting overexcited at the moment. As I say, the ETH BTC chart does look good, but it's still very early days. So right now we've got this level to contend with. If we get above this, then we're looking at this region here. Above that, then we can start talking about 4K. And again, nice psychological numbers. People do like round numbers. So it's good levels to look out for. Now, what happens if we roll over? What if we start to roll over? Well, if we start to roll over, first and foremost, we're looking at the daily chart right now. The daily will maintain its uptrend as long as we are hovering above this consolidation here. So what does that mean? Well, that means the price can still technically come all the way back down here and still remain bullish structured because the daily is up. Okay, the daily is up, the 3 days up, the weekly is locally up, the monthly is still technically down. Okay, so the monthly needs to get its ass all the way back up here and start closing price action up here before the monthly turns around. Okay, so that's one thing that's working against ETH at the moment compared to a lot of other altcoins out there. There's a lot more interesting altcoins out there to trade, and we'll go through a few today. So if we do see a pullback into this consolidation here, in fact, I don't even need to draw on this volume profile here because you can see it here on the right hand side. We do have a lot of volume within this range. So if we do get a pullback within to this range, and then it starts to show us some local strength without closing a daily below this level, then there's potentially a long opportunity. Now, if that doesn't give us the long opportunity, bear in mind what we want to see the strength. We're not just going to ape into longs if price comes back down into that region. Okay, we want to see the strength. We want to see the market structure shift. We want to see people heavily shorting this, but getting no follow through. Then we can look for the long opportunities. Because if we don't get that, then realistically, we can look back down towards the breakout region, which is the old range high, which is coming in roughly around 2K, $2,032. So if we come down below this volume cluster, this high volume cluster, and get a good reaction here, then we've potentially got more long opportunities. If that doesn't give us anything and we get acceptance back into this old range, then that's not going to look very strong for ETH, and realistically I'd be looking back down at this EQ. So looking back down towards 1450, give or take, as a region. Okay, and if you're bullish, you want to pray that that level holds, because if that doesn't hold, then realistically we can start looking back down at the range low. But effectively all it means is if we get acceptance back into this, we are just back to trading this old macro range. Okay, so where we are right now, I'm not overly bearish, I'm cautious, but while the uptrend is intact, trade with the trend. Okay, so next, speaking of trending coins, TIA. TIA? I don't even know what this is. Let's have a see. So this is the first time I've taken a look at this. I believe this is pretty much all the history that we have right now. But effectively, we've got a trending altcoin. So we're still making a series of higher highs and higher lows. And while this trend is still pointing up, longs are still in favour. Okay, so can we get anything else out of this? Well, first and foremost, let's see if we can get a channel on here. Do we use this pivot? Don't know if this wick exists on all exchanges, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore that wick. There, that's better. Someone will have to let me know down below if this wick exists on other exchanges, because if it does, then it is valid. But for now, we're just going to ignore that wick. So we're looking at this on a daily chart. Everything's still pointing up. Realistically, it's still looking good. Now, what you'd be looking for now is if this is to continue its uptrend, realistically, what you want to see is you want to see a breakout of this channel and a continuation to the upside. If you get that, then it's going to look fairly healthy. Now, if we bring on the volume as well, let's take it out of log. The volume's starting to die off a little bit, so it's something that you need to be cautious of. But once again, this is the volume purely on one exchange. Okay, so you need to look at this across the board. But for the time being, the volume's starting to die off a little bit, which is normally what you expect when you see a large push to the upside. What you do want to see is you want to see more volume coming in. But once again, these volume metrics down at the bottom of trading view aren't very useful. It gives you a good overall view, but it's not telling you what's happening inside the candle. And I've talked about that before. So, where do I become bearish on this coin? Well, realistically, again, looking on the daily here, zooming about the 3 day, how does that look? 3 days still looking good. Weekly's obviously looking good. In fact, we've got a nice level right there. So if we're going to come onto the weekly chart, I'm just going to draw a line below here. So that's the low that caused the high on a weekly closure basis. Okay, so if we start to get a pullback. Now, bear in mind, this is not something I'd naturally be shorting because the trend is still up. So what's the point in you know, aggressively shorting against an uptrend like this. However, price action could come all the way back down into this level. And let's just ignore that channel for now. So let's just hide that channel. Price can come all the way back down to this region and still maintain its uptrend. Now, why do I like this region? Well, this is the consolidation that led to the expansion. Okay, so if we throw on a volume profile within this, we can see here, there you go, your point of control is actually down here, but we've also got some high volume nodes within this. But effectively what I'd be looking for is, if we do come back down into this range, you'd then be looking for that sign of strength. So then you'd be looking for that market structure shift. So you'd be looking for this, then looking for this, then this, and then this would be your optimal entry. Once you start to see that market structure shift to the upside, that's what you'd be looking for. Now, obviously, you can use order flow on things like this if it does show up on order flow software, like, for example, ExoCharts like we use, or Atos. But effectively, that's what I'll be looking for in this region. Now, if we start to lose this region and we get no bounce, in fact, we'll leave that line on there, and let's just get rid of these, just clear some of these up. If we get no bounce on this, then that's when it starts to look a little bit bearish, and we can start to look at some lower prices. So if we throw on a volume profile of the whole thing, now, if we start to lose this range and coming back down here, then this is not looking great, okay? Because there's very little structure on the way up. The biggest, we've got some structure here, which is around $9.67, give or take. Now, below that, I'd be more interested in this structure down here, which is coming in roughly around $6. Now, have we got any confluence down there? Well, throw it on a Fibonacci from the low to the high. We can see we've got that golden pocket sitting around here. And if we come down even lower, we've got that 786, which that is your stronger level. If you start to lose this zone, then realistically, you're looking back down at the point of control, and that's going to look very bearish. But for now, it's pointless looking down at these levels because the trend is still up. Okay, what if it continues up higher? Where can it go? Again, we're in price discovery mode, so I'm not going to sit here and start making up some random number price targets like a lot of the moon boys will do, because that's what they are, the random price targets. It'd be a lot easier to create some price targets if we do see this pullback and then continue up. Because if we do that, then we can start to use some fib extensions and start creating some very realistic price targets. But for the time being now, it's time for caution here. It's not somewhere I'd be necessarily longing, purely because we're into that channel like we showed right at the beginning. Okay. And again, even if price does start breakdown here, unless we start to see a 4-hour change of structure within this zone, I've no interest in shorting that, even if it does drop all the way down here. No interest in shorting. Not when the overall high time frame trend is still pointing upwards. Okay. Next, woo. Right, okay, so if I was a betting man, I'm going to say that this is similar to ETH. Yep, there you go. So, woo came into the golden pocket with a very nice rejection. So obviously, if you did catch that play, then that's a very nice play to the downside. You ended up with a 35-36% move to the downside. Well done if you caught that. If you were long on that and you didn't skim off some profits there, kind of more fool you. It's a high time frame golden pocket. Once again, the rest of the market came into the high time frame golden pocket all at the same time. Okay, so it's one thing, you know, I've said this before, even if you are a hodler rather than a day trader, you still need to understand some very basic TA, even just something as basic as Fibonacci. You need to understand Fibonacci. Because if you understand this, then you can see that you've got a macro pivot here, and then you've got your absolute lows. Drawing a Fibonacci from this macro pivot to the low, coming into a high time frame, a macro golden pocket, okay, it's not a time to get overly bullish. It's a time, if you are long from lower, start skimming off some profits, and potentially a time to hedge. Now, obviously, that's only if it gives you the setup. That's not something that you just blindly short. Okay, you need to look lower time frame, zoom in, know what you're looking for. In this instance, this was actually quite a nice short. I know some of the guys in the group caught this, which is why I know what's going on with this. But effectively, what you've got here is, in fact, we'll use a box because it makes life a lot easier and a lot clearer. You've got a bit of a resistance zone here. Okay, resistance zone. Effectively, all you've got is you've got a range. You've got a range. Okay. You got your range highs, you got your range lows. And what we can see here in this instance, a bit of a lesson for you. Got the highs, another attempt at the highs, then you confirm your lows. Highs, don't come all the way down. Highs, come all the way down. Then we'll come back up. Highs, reject. push up. Now, what's happened in this push up here is all we've done is we've just grabbed all the stop losses. So anyone that shorted here, anyone that shorted here, shorted here, shorted here, and shorted here. All these stop losses have just been run into that high time frame golden pocket, and then you've had the big rejection. So this is why the low time frame charts come into play. So if you start to see range forming, okay, even if you are a hodler of this, and you start to see a range forming underneath a macro resistance like this is the context. And you start to see equal highs being printed. And then you see those highs being run, and then price gets acceptance back into the range. Now that's locally a bearish sign. Now, you zoom out, the overall context is this has happened into a macro golden pocket, so likelihood is you're going to see a larger sell-off. And then what did you get? Well, that's when you got that 36% sell-off. Okay, so anyway, there's your little education piece out of the way. Hopefully you learned something there. Now what's going to happen next? Okay, so let's throw it on a volume profile across the whole thing, and let's see where all the volume lies. And we can see here. So first and foremost, let's look to the upside. If this is the low, and we start to push up from here, and we get beyond this golden pocket without having a simple swing failure pattern of this high, that's something that's very important in this region, then realistically we can start looking up towards this zone here, which is roughly around 62 cents to 57 cents, because we can see on the volume profile here, this is the last bit of volume that's holding down as resistance. If we push straight through that, and again, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to pretend saying we are going to push through this, because I'm a trader, and at the end of the day, the only truth I can say is nobody knows what's going to happen. So if this, then that. So this is the plan for upside. If we push through this, then realistically, the last point of potential simple turnaround would be this high here. And again, I'm looking on the daily here. So if we do end up coming up here, little swing failure pattern up here, taking the liquidity above these highs, then there's potentially a short trigger there. Again, it comes down to context, and you look zooming in, just like what we did here, zooming into lower time frame to see what's going on. If you don't get anything there at all, then realistically, there's no reason why you're not tagging them towards $1. Okay, so that's to the upside. Now, let's bring this back. Let's get rid of some of these squiggles. Now, what happens if we start to roll over here? Bear in mind, we have tagged a macro golden pocket. Well, if we just follow in the volume, once again, then if we start to roll over, then we can start looking back down towards this value area high. And then there's your big question right there. Do you get acceptance back into value? If you do, then we start looking back down lower. First and foremost, looking in roughly around 21 cents, 21, 22 cents. And if that doesn't hold, then I'll be looking back down at this point of control here, down at around 17 cents. Okay. But that's only if you get acceptance into value. If you don't get acceptance into value and you get a nice rejection off value area high, then once again, you can start looking at higher prices. And all this has done effectively is just filled out this inefficient move that's pushed price up. So once again, I've talked about this before. If you do get a big bullish move like this, and it's just effectively a straight line up without any consolidation, then you don't want price coming back into that, because as quick as this happened, it can come back through just as quick. Okay, so ideally, if you are bullish, you want this consolidation to lead into another expansion to the upside. But if you are a bear, then you want this expansion to happen to the downside, because then we can look to come through that quite quickly down into roughly 26 cents initially. Okay, so that is woo. And finally, SUI. I have no idea what you call this. Right, I'm pretty sure this is the oldest chart I can find. It's very, very difficult to do a complete analysis when you've got a chart that's this new, but we can still work with what we've got. So volume profile first and foremost. Let's look at this. I'm going to ignore this wick, because this wick may be different on all exchanges. So I'm going to ignore this wick for now. I'm going to look at what we're doing right now. So we are creating a bit of a high volume node here. Now, this high volume node might not necessarily have existed before this price action. No, it did. So there you go. So we can see here, so before this happened, because I pulled the volume profile back here, before this happened, we can see here we've got high volume right there. Okay, so realistically, this is the last major resistance zone. Now we're going to pull it all the way along. So if we are to maintain these high highs and high lows, then realistically, you want to see price flip this high volume level, this high volume node, and then start to look up. And if we start to look up, then realistically, you are technically in blue sky territory, even though you have got this full wick that potentially could be backfilled. Now, I'm not saying it's going to go all the way up to $4. It could do, but we'll see. Again, we need to see how price action develops. That's to the upside. So effectively, we're at the last major resistance. Now, if you really wanted to, you could actually just look at this as an overall range. Okay, the reason why we can do that is because we do have this volume here. So if we're just going to look at this as an overall range, well, there's your highs. I would be more comfortable saying there's your lows. And the reason why I'm looking at that as there's your lows, let's go rid of this volume profile, is because you've got to see price coming down. Lower low, lower low, lower low. Then you get some good reactions on this level. And then what do? You then deviate back below, reclaim, back test, and then that's what leads to the expansion to the upside. Okay. So if price is to roll down, now the beauty of this chart is price could, once again, similar to what we were looking at on the previous coin, is if price does roll over, and I'm looking at this on the daily chart here, price can come all the way back down into this zone here and get a bounce, and it would still be bullish on the daily. Okay, so even though that look, and this would probably scare the hell out of most people, you could come all the way down 36% and still be bullish. And still be bullish. Okay, and this is where people go wrong, especially when you've got massively trending markets like we are right now. Don't get me wrong, we are now at the point of caution because of where Bitcoin is. I've explained this before. But this is where people get scared because they'll see something like this happen. Now, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying if. And they'll get shaken out. They won't see a sign of strength, a local market structure shift to the upside, and they'll miss out because then you get the bounce. Now, don't get me wrong, if you don't see any strength here at all, then realistically, you can start looking at lower prices. Now, if we're starting to look at lower prices, then this is where we do this. And it starts to come back below there. If this doesn't hold, then we can start looking back down at the point of control. And realistically, this is coming in roughly around 60 cents for easy numbers. Okay. So to the upside, break out of the range, then you are in price discovery. To the downside, back into this cluster here. And if that doesn't hold, then back down towards the point of control. Now, once again, if that point of control doesn't hold, then you're just looking back down at the range low again. And all this is just a high time frame range. Okay, that'll do. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's content. If you have, hit that like button. And once again, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. And until next time, gang, as you were. Bye-bye.